Welcome back to Trailblazers, the podcast where we delve into the stories of visionary leaders who are redefining industries and leaving lasting legacies. Today, I'm honored to feature a true pioneer in the world of confections and snacks. Rocco Damato, the former CEO of Bazzini and now shareholder, has been at the helm of America's oldest nut company, founded in 1886. Under his leadership, Bazzini has not only preserved its rich heritage, but has also embraced innovation, expanding the offerings to include chocolates and dried fruits. From supplying, get ready for this, peanuts to Yankee Stadium since 1923, to acquiring the historic Barton's Candy Company in 2011, Rocco's journey is a testament to strategic foresight and unwavering dedication. So grab your favorite snack and join us as we explore the remarkable story of Rocco Damato and the enduring legacy of Bazzini. Rocco, welcome to Trailblazers. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Good afternoon, Melody. Thank you for having me. And by the way, Iron Pigs as well.
You say that again?
We supplied peanuts to the Iron Pigs as well.
Wonderful.
So
okay, good.
Let's not forget our local.
I'll be certain to notate that we had you on the show. Kurt Landis is going to join us pretty soon, so he heads up the Iron Pigs. But yeah, that's incredible. That's awesome. Rocco, when we first met, I was working in economic development, and I remember sitting down and not really understand. My role at that time was to kind of talk to CEOs and business leaders about what we're doing well as a region, what we could be doing better, how we can help you to grow and thrive here. And when I sat down, I was so starstruck in a sense, because you guys have this company that has been around for forever, and you were like, we supply the peanuts to Yankee Stadium, which I think is just such a testament to kind of the legacy that Bazzini has built, the relationship that has existed. I'd like you to take us back a little bit and tell me, from an Bazzini's an iconic name in confections, but how did you first become involved with the company, and what drew you to that world? And more importantly, what drew you to the Lehigh Valley as the supplier of Yankee Stadium peanuts, right?
Maybe go backwards first.
Okay.
Lehigh Valley, it was more an opportunity for facility. 2009 Food Safety Act required companies that were in the food business in relatively marginal facilities to really step up their game. Mm-hmm. And this facility in Mill Road was such a facility. We had one in the Bronx and a confectionery facility in Moosic near Scranton, both of which were aged and didn't really make the grade that was going to be developing. So the opportunity for facility to just move into was there. Mm-hmm. It had an infrastructure that was perfect for confections, multi-million-dollar infrastructure. It was during the Great Recession, so the company that was a chocolate company in there, Cherrydale, an old fundraising
Yes, I
company,
remember. Yes,
dissolved, and the facility was available. And it was a time when no one really wanted facilities because it was the serious economic recession, and so the facility was there for us to move into. The Moosic facility, which was confections, moved the Bronx facility, was primarily nuts and dry fruit, consolidated them into here, which was almost equidistant from Philadelphia and New York. So geographically, this area is a transportation capital of the Northeast, and maybe up and down the East Coast. So that opportunity comes, and when it comes, it sort of knocks. You better take it because it goes away quickly. So we did move into that. Now, going further back, we were in the Bronx for about 16, 17 years. It was a transitional facility that was much different from our original facility, which was down in, it's now Tribeca, Lower Manhattan. We were in six buildings that were connected through holes in walls and 6-7 elevators. And it was past the level of efficient. It didn't work anymore. However, the great impetus for us to leave was originally food distribution and light manufacturing. And I think I mentioned a Hotel Bar Butter, Land of Lakes, Tetley Tea, Martinson Coffee, Red Bow Beans, Bazzini Nuts.
Right.
All of those guys were down there because they were close to the docks.
Correct.
And,
yeah.
well, that was terrific at that point. But as the financial district exploded and expanded, well, we became part of the financial district, and that wasn't going to let that kind of old manufacturing and warehousing exist anymore. And now all those buildings are multi-million-dollar lofts. There's one building next to us that was about, I guess it must be about 5,000 square feet. Actually, we owned once. It's been 30 years ago. It's now been developed and developed and developed. Now it's on sale for $27 million.
Wow.
So that doesn't allow for
Right.
Food manufacturing. So we went from Manhattan to the Bronx, and then the Bronx was successful. It allowed us to grow substantially. We owned a property in Manhattan, converted that to an upscale retail store and lofts above, and then as I said, as 2009 developed, and the Food Safety Act passed, I did recognize that we were going to have to up our game, as everybody was going to have up
Right.
their game. So I recognized that neither facility was going to accommodate us. So I found this opportunity during the time I told you that leads us back to the place where in 2010.
So you
I
guys came
acquired
to the
the
Lehigh
lease.
Valley around that time.
Yep. I
Okay.
acquired the lease, and I went to the auction and bought a large number of the equipment in the facility, since it was a chocolate facility.
Right.
I hired the chief operating officer, marketing director, and production manager from the old company. They reconstructed some of their old business. I moved those two other businesses into this 1035 Mill Road location. And it took about 2 or 3 years to do all of that, because in the middle of it, there were a number of different economic and difficult circumstances. So it took a while to do it. We ultimately did it, and found that since it's both close to New York and Philadelphia, and it's in a 21st century facility, we could now grow the company and do the kind of business that was available.
What an interesting story. That's incredible. So, and Bazzini is, the brand is, I call it kind of the bougie nut company, right?
Yeah, it is. You're right.
I mean, you guys have had, Martha Stewart, foodies. Foodies are all
Yeah.
about Bazzini. If there's nuts to be, had, so to speak, then Bazzini is kind of at the forefront for, fine hotels and
Exactly.
chefs and around the world and what have you. How did you get involved with something so big? And, what was your first memory of ambition? Was there a defining moment when you realized you were destined to lead something big like Bazzini?
I think it just evolved. I don't know that I was at any point early in the game or throughout the game that I was going to be destined for it. I think I sort of followed an interest, because in the late, I'm going to be 80 in July, so I've been
Oh,
around.
my word.
I've been around a while. So I was teaching school, and I liked to eat dry fruits and nuts, and I found out about the company called Bazzini in Zaloom, which was another nut company in Lower Manhattan, Tribeca. And so I started buying it and eating it, and I started sharing it because people liked it, and it got carried away. And I think what pulled me into it was the love of the product. And I loved it. I loved cashews, and I loved apricots, and I loved fresh Turkish figs and Kalamurna figs from California, and jumbo lake peaches and pears, and a great style Warner Zero macadamia. I mean, these are just fascinating things. And everybody liked them. And we were moving in a time when, the wind was at your back. People were looking into natural foods. It moved out of an ethnic group in the 60s, 50s, 60s, into a broader market in the 80s and 90s. And it is now totally mainstream. You find nuts and dried fruit snacks everywhere. 50 years ago, not so much. So I think that pulled me along. That the growing demand and interest in it pulled me along. And the fascination is extraordinary because I would go to California every other year in February and drive up and down the Central Valley looking at almonds grow, right? There's about 1,200,000 acres of almonds in California. The company buys 2.5 million pounds of almonds, and the market on almonds is extremely volatile, can be extremely volatile. For example, last year this time, you could buy a pound of them for truckloads, multiple truckloads at $2.35 cost. Now you're going to pay $3.75 cost. So now you buy 2.5 million pounds and the market goes up $1.40. You had better contract stuff early in the game and know what's going on. So I thought that was very fascinating. And going out into the fields and looking at the growth and seeing the bees fly, that all fascinated me. And whether it was that or cashews in Carroll Estate in India or virtually anywhere in the world, because anywhere in the world they grow nuts and dry fruit, you could go and you could experience a different level of being there. And so love of the product, finding myself more and more in this world of Bazzini, Mr. Bazzini. I wasn't Mr. Bazzini. It was just the role of, it's like Princess Bride. I've always compared it to the Princess Bride. Remember the Captain Pirate Roberts in the Princess Bride?
Yeah.
And he said there was never the captain. It was someone playing the role all the time. And I played the role of Mr. Bazzini. I wasn't Mr. Bazzini, but I was in the experience of Bazzini. I mean, I would go into a restaurant, my accountant would introduce me, and one of my customers, actually wasn't a direct customer, through one of the food service customers I have, would start buying me drinks and dessert. But you're my customer. I'm not your customer. I'm eating here, but you took on that mantle of identity. And that just, again, that with all the fascinating aspects dragged me along. And the wind at your back, which you need a lot of things. And one of the things you need with the wind at your back, good luck, God, call it what you like. You need it. And I was going, with
Let's talk about that journey, actually. How did you get your start with Bazzini? So, you obviously loved, nuts and dried fruits, but I'm certain you didn't start out as CEO. So
no.
How did it?
Actually, at Bazzini, I did start out as CEO, but it's exactly right. I didn't start out as CEO of Bazzini. Back to that stage of liking the product and buying the product. Well, I was teaching ninth grade social studies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so this is like a second career for you in a sense.
At 32, I left teaching.
Okay.
I was tenured in that, but I thought, it's kind of difficult making a living.
Yeah.
It's a tough job, and it's not well rewarded, honestly. But
and you were in Manhattan at the time?
No, I was on Long Island.
Okay.
Living there. Only Manhattan when I acquired Bazzini. So it started out, and then ultimately I started a little company. And the little company grew through a number of iterations of facility and development into a snack bag company of dry fruits, nuts. And you get into banking and borrow money from bank for your inventory, et cetera. So I would always tell a banker once a year we had to have a meeting, explain what was going on, the dog and pony show business. So I did it, and part of it I would tell them about the industry where a lot of the men at that point, it was purely men. It's no longer purely men, but it was men at that point, were aging out. And their kids were accountants, lawyers, doctors, professionals, and didn't want anything to do with it. So there was no group coming through to take over those kinds of businesses. And so there was an opportunity, and one of the companies where El Bazzini passed away was now in his estate, was in probate, et cetera, and it was for sale. And he said, well, why don't you buy it? And I said, wait a minute. I'm here doing dog and pony shows for $125,000 a year. They got a $2 million inventory. There's no way I'm going to do it. He said, I'll tell you what, which I thought was one of those wind at your back opportunities.
Yes, yep.
He was unfortunately going through a divorce, and he said, I'll tell you what, I need to take a couple months and lay on the beach. If you pay me for the next 2 months, I'll show you how to do it. So I stopped taking a paycheck and made him give him a paycheck, and he showed me what a leverage buyout was. which was, look, it's legitimate. It's a great tool that people today could use. Just learn about it. It's a
Yeah.
great tool. You use the assets of the seller to leverage yourself into his position. It's a little complicated, but once you understand it, it's not so difficult. Nevertheless, it worked.
Yeah.
And so in 1983, with a leverage buyout, I acquired Bazzini
Wow.
and became, well, I didn't become the CEO. Teddy Bazzini wanted to stay president, and I'm not that big on titles.
The namesake,
so
sure.
He could be president
Yeah,
as
yeah.
long as you want. So I was executive vice president. And then, he retired and passed on, and then I took on that role. But again, it was evolutionary. It was, you just sort of followed opportunities, and they presented themselves, and the wind at your back or swimming downstream. It's what occurred.
I mean, what an incredible story. So, I think especially like coming out of COVID, a lot of people have been looking at, other opportunities, maybe not just staying in the corporate world or doing what they once did. Like you had mentioned, you were in social studies, and then you were a social studies teacher, and then you started, selling bags of snacks.
Correct.
And then it turned into this like venture
Yeah.
that like exploded.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden here we are. But, I venture to guess to say that there's probably some listeners out there thinking, "What? Oh my gosh, I got to look into this leverage buyout, because how cool is that?"
It is.
Turning what for some people may be at first a side hustle, and then like turning it into this incredible company that has probably evolved over time and gone through several ebbs and flows. Tell me about that. So, you acquired Barton's, right?
Yes.
And how did you kind of, get into all of that?
Bazzini had its primary business, as you've said, was the dry fruit nuts, hotels, restaurants, gourmet shops, Yankee Stadium, Belmont Racetrack, Giant Stadium, all of those things. That was its the circus, all of those things. That was its niche, and frankly, if you had New York City back in the day, you didn't really need much of anything else. It was you could make enough money with what goes on in New York City. But New York City's changed, the country's changed, reality's changed. Things move on. So as it moved on, in its core, it had chocolate making and confectionery making. So and when you looked at the nature of the business, that was a bigger opportunity for growth. Long conversation why we don't have time for that. Big opportunity for growth in confections, chocolate and other kinds of confections. And margin was better. So I began to put more energy into developing that. Not that we wanted to give away our bougie branded aspect, but we wanted to grow that component, which had the ability to grow. And as a result, I bought a company called Bazzini, which, interestingly enough, my grandmother worked for on that line with Lucille
Yes.
Ball.
Yeah.
My grandmother worked in Queens, where Bazzini was owned. And I bought it, and that was in the Moosic near Scranton facility.
Okay.
And then and I expanded the confectionery business through that facility and through that company. But I also used Bazzini distribution system to sell some of the things that they made.
Okay.
That's the beauty of that similar channel business. So that was going along, and then this opportunity happened in Mill Road, Allentown, where the facility was great. The 2009 Food Safety Act pushed us out of those places into this. And then in 2010, I started the consolidation of those two facilities into the Allentown facility. Right now, the Allentown facility is totally maxed out, way maxed out. I think they have 150, 350, I don't know, close to 500,000 square feet on the roof, and they're going to probably end up being a $250 million company.
And we're going to talk a little bit about that growth pretty soon.
Yeah, so that's what occurred.
Yeah.
We moved into those places. And interestingly enough, it's the same pattern that you sort of follow the opportunities.
But that was a pivot in strategy, right? So,
I think so.
how have you ever? How did you know it was time to shift gears? Were you worried about it? How did you handle some of those challenges? Like, what were you up against?
Uh, yeah, I think I worry about it. That's the problem with being a CEO. You worry about something all the time.
Everything, yeah.
If it's going to be something in administrative part of the company, you worry about that. If it's out of the marketing part of the company, you worry about that. If it's sales, wherever the trouble is where you go. Therefore, you worry.
Right.
That's the nature. But your problem solving is it's not just sitting woe is me. You have to problem solve. So I concern myself with it all, but I have this process of thinking. I don't know if you're aware of sort of sequential thinking. So this is where you are, and this is where you want to go, and there may be more than one path. And you look at, if I do this, then I do this, then I do this, and it's a sequence and sequence and sequence, consequence, right? And that's where I want to get. So as I did all of that, the things that worried me, I looked at all the possibilities of getting there. Obviously, you have to constantly review it so you don't make a left turn when you try and make a right. But I worried, but I was always pretty much comfortable with where I was going.
Because you were calculated.
Because it was all sort of
planned.
Pre-planned. Now, ultimately, some of these directions fall to the wayside because they're not going anywhere, right? And then ultimately, if you keep pursuing that sequential thinking, you get to the consequence. And I think that mitigates some of the fear and trepidation of the process. And I think I would recommend that to anyone running a company.
Did you ever place a bet you didn't win on?
Yes.
In business?
Yes.
And in life?
More than a bet.
Share.
Well, the one was I had this fantasy. I guess it wasn't a fantasy for a lot of time, but now retrospectively it was a fantasy about developing an upscale Frito-Lay, We had nuts, confections, and I wanted to do a baking component. So you'd have a section in markets, wherever you were, you'd have your nuts, your chocolate, and baking. I bought a baking company, and it just was a nightmare. It was inconsistent with what we did, and it just didn't. Sometimes you go too far afield, and you really can't control it, especially if you keep pursuing a number of things at the same time. So I did have to give up the baking, but in the back of my head, I don't think it was a terrible idea. It's just that I couldn't execute it. So that was a road when I kept looking at the sequences, I kept saying, I'm not going to get to the consequence. So I just sold it.
What did that teach you? And how do you handle, I hate this F word, but failure or challenge? Like, what did that teach you? What did you learn from that?
Well, they somehow have made failure and challenge synonymous. I don't know that they are, but let's just talk about failure for a moment. I think to some extent, I see failure as reaching a place where you just simply give up and it doesn't work, right? But if you find yourself there and you sort of fall off a cliff and now, I failed, okay, that may be a failure. But if you recognize that, okay, this path isn't working, and I don't really want to spend any more time or fall down that pit, it isn't a failure. It's a road you went down with some prospect, but the prospect was out of reach or it didn't fit or whatever the reason was. So challenges, like, okay, this is going to be something I want to do, and I'm going to have to put all my energy and all my thought power into succeeding in it, and I'm going to fight and scratch and bite to get there. Failure is an end place where you just sort of capitulate. And I think a challenge can be used to prevent failure, right? If you keep thinking properly and you see that road's taking me somewhere I don't want to go, you just stop. So I did fail with, I failed to execute the idea with Steve's mom, which was the name of the baking company. But I saw it coming and said, I don't want to end up doing that, right? So I think if you don't use a process of planning and you don't review that process sufficiently, and you keep going down roads where purely based upon dream and fantasy, then that might end to the place called failure, where it just financially doesn't work.
Yeah.
But I don't think it failed, Steve's mom. I think the dream failed, but
Yeah.
it didn't hurt my business at all.
Yeah, and when and in asking that question, I mean, even from like a holistic perspective, it's, if ever you encounter a challenge that could be perceived as such, how do you handle that? But honestly, I don't think I've ever met a leader that has done something, maybe it didn't turn out and they stopped, right? That just doesn't happen, because I feel like every leader that I've ever encountered has kind of evolved it into an opportunity or something that can, if nothing else, you learn from, but you still keep evolving.
Yeah, I don't think. Look, going down the road of Steve's mom didn't prevent me from going down the
Others.
other roads.
Yeah.
Right? It's just that aspect. Again, I think it's still a good idea. Cookies would be a great idea. But that aspect was just out of reach, especially if you're buying other companies, because I did a number of acquisitions. I think I've acquired about 9 or 10 companies
Oh, wow.
in my history. A lot of it distribution, brands, facilities. There were a number of reasons you acquire things, not always for one specific reason. Sometimes management.
And so you're still a shareholder of the company,
Yeah,
right?
actually, second
You're
largest,
officially retired as of
March 1st of this year.
March 1st, and you're 80.
Yeah, I'll be 80 in July, shortly.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Well, I don't think you have to. I mean,
no, you don't have to stop. Absolutely not. But
No.
that's a true testament to the work ethic you clearly had.
Well, if you had fun, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm telling you, I'd go anywhere in the world.
I know.
And I would be pretty much meeting somebody at the airport who would take me around.
Yeah. So two questions come out of that. One, what is Bazzini up to now? What are you most fired up about that's on the horizon? And I want to hear about the growth into Hanover Township here in the Lehigh Valley.
Yeah, sure.
But also, how do you manage those ebbs and flows and outlook on the company and keeping it evolving?
Well, what's good is that the current CEO, who was my COO, Richard Tulsis, has, and my son actually is his second, who went to Lehigh, interestingly enough, and has been in the nut business since I don't know, 11 years old. He's been eating nuts and pushing hand trucks around. Both of them have the Bazzini culture in their blood, right? So they understand that part of the business is critical. New York metro area is it's a brand, a significant brand. In the food service business throughout the country, it's a brand. Up and down the East Coast, even some parts on the West Coast we sell to. But the brand isn't really out there. But east of Mississippi, it's a brand. A lot of chefs come out of New York and go to different places and they bring it with them. Now, so that core business is part of who they are. But it has grown substantially to accommodate, again, what the new opportunities and realities are, which are private label contract packaging, which is now, $50 million accounts, and because they're national. And what excites me is sort of following up on something that I thought about. I don't know, maybe it was about 7, 8 years ago, where I was looking at reality here and basically, look, we have enough different lines. We do all kinds of stuff. We make our own peanut butter, almond butter, cashew butter, make the filling for a peanut butter cup and almond butter. We just do all kinds of stuff. So it's enough, all kinds of stuff. Now what we want to do is get into the world of efficiency, automation, robotics. So we began to stop making more lines and start putting efficiency into our current lines. And what that was for a purpose of what we were doing, but coincidentally, if you want to do private labeling for national companies and you want to do contract packaging for national and international companies, you better be efficient because they don't give you much room.
Yeah.
And the way to be efficient in this world is automation and robotics. We could buy, back in the day, we could buy a robot in, order it in 6 months, you have it. Now, order it in 2 years, you have it. So everyone in the manufacturing world now recognizes that automation and robotics are the things, actually, interestingly enough, beyond the food world, is something that competes with China. China's thing was primarily low labor costs. But if you have robots and automation, it doesn't necessarily eliminate jobs. It eliminates unskilled jobs. It enhances skilled jobs. The amount of money you can make. We had a mechanic technician making over $250,000 a year. He didn't go to college. So the fact that is now in the company, and we opened this facility, the Stuff Puff facility we talked to you about.
Yes.
That is going to be, it is structurally a food state-of-the-art facility, but the equipment that they're putting in there is all, high-tech, high-speed, very efficient. So they're going to be doing some work for international companies.
So
that's where it's gone.
Yeah. So as this company has evolved and you guys are now automated and all of that, what philosophy do you have for leaders out there?
You don't ask superficial questions, Melody. God, I hesitate to sort of instruct on any of this stuff. I'm not sure I'm really qualified for it. I would just, we're back to the same old things, do what you love, be persistent, work hard, focus, follow up. Those are all pretty much standard recommendations. You know why? Because they're a legitimate recommendation.
Yeah.
They work. Do I have anything new or novel? No, I don't think so. I think I would certainly say that whether it's, I said before, wind at your back or good luck or God, that component really is important.
Yeah.
So I don't pretend to be all that smart.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you being with us today and providing that advice, and just an incredible amount of advice from an incredible guy that led an incredible company. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Melody. You've been very kind.
This is Trailblazers, and I'm Melody Bradford, your host.